By the way, that what you're doing with your hands, I always do that when I just go like that and with the thumbs while I'm waiting.
All right. I mean,
It's international.
what is yes, it is.
Yeah.
Hi there. Can you hear me
All
now?
right.
Oh,
Okay.
there was
How
a
embarrassing.
No, it's fine.
Yes, I'm
So
so
are you
sorry.
in spot? I didn't know. I just guessed.
No, I'm underneath. I'm in a little prison here, underneath the stairs, like Harry Potter. But I'm happy for the invitation. I'm sorry to waste your time with the, but everything's fine now. So I wanted to talk about about the connection, as we heard, between farming and the land of Israel and faith. And I was born in Kansas, which is a farming place, but none of the Jews worked in farming. And a friend of mine and I decided we wanted to move to Israel. And he became very religious, and I just wanted to be a farmer. And so he told me how he fell in love with a girl, and he wanted to ask her parents' hand in marriage. And she told him he has to study the Talmud very, very well, because when he comes over to ask for her hand from his father and her brothers will test him on a page of Talmud. So he was studying, and when he felt he was ready, he went and he passed the test, and they were married. Everything was great. So I also met a woman I wanted to marry, and her father, instead of being a Talmud scholar, was a farmer. And she told me, look, before you come over and we talk about marriage, you're going to have to learn, he's going to ask you questions about farming and plants and crops and birds. So you got to learn all this stuff about how nature works in farming. So I studied and studied, and I remembered my friend's story, and I went, and he said, what's this growing over here in this field? And I said, that's alfalfa. And he said, good. Yeah. And what's it? So I passed the test, and we got married, and we decided we were going to be farmers. And I was just taking my first steps in connecting to Judaism and the land of Israel, really my first steps. And we were living on a kibbutz. And I knew that my wife's kibbutz, her farm, is where they started organic farming in Israel, where they don't spray and they don't spray poison on the food that you eat, but they do it in a very special way. And they've got a huge business called B.O.B., and they deal, as Rav Gedalia said, also in bees, but also they actually produce bugs that eat bugs. So that instead of spraying the bugs, you just let other bugs go and they eat those bugs. And they do all kinds of things that are fascinating that have to do with farming. So I knew that they had organic farming, but we were living on a new kibbutz, and we were growing sweet potatoes. Now in Israel, you grow sweet potatoes in the sand, and we have a terrible beetle, a very big black beetle that comes and eats the sweet potatoes underneath the ground, and you can't sell them. They look terrible. And the Israelis called this beetle Khomeini. I don't know why, but it has to do with the man. It's a long story and a lot of politics. But anyway, you can imagine that when you spray against beetles, it's a very dangerous spray, because beetles, they're serious animals. They're like little monsters. So without asking any questions, I simply went, and they told me to spray, and I sprayed. And once, this is before they had cell phones, I ran out of spray and waited for the car to come around, and I read the can for the first time. And in it, in English, it said, heptachlor. This is made in the United States, not for sale in the United States. So I was like, what? How can you make a chemical in your country, but you don't allow it to be used in your country? It must be pretty bad, but other people can use it. So I had a brother, still have a brother who's a journalist in the United States, and I wrote him a letter. Remember letters with envelopes and a stamp? I wrote him a letter, and I said, give me a computer printout on everything you have on heptachlor. And he sent me back 300 pages. And I read that heptachlor is a known carcinogen, which means it causes cancer. It's not maybe causes cancer, it definitely causes cancer. And I realized that instead of feeding the world and making sweet potatoes, I was maybe killing people and causing them terrible pain. I couldn't continue doing it. I went back to the kibbutz and I said, we got to change. We can't do this. This is terrible. We're causing cancer. And they said, look, we're a young kibbutz. If the Israel allows this spray to be sprayed, it must not be so bad. I said, look, I have 300 pages here about how it kills people. And they said, look, I'm sorry, this is a kibbutz. And we don't, if you don't want to work here, you don't have to, but you can't be a farmer and tell us what to do. It goes according to the majority. So I knew they were right, but I had one more plan. I went to my wife's kibbutz, to the man who started organic farming. And I said, this is the situation. Is there any way I can grow sweet potatoes without heptachlor? And he said, sure, it's much easier. And you'll make a lot more money that way too. But first you have to come and do a course with me. 2 weeks of a course on how to be an organic farmer. And I learned, it was fascinating, just fascinating. And how to be at one with the world and nature. And I went back and we planted the sweet potatoes. The kibbutz gave me their blessing. They'll give me one chance to have sweet potatoes that are organic. And they grew so fast, they're much more beautiful. I used to take them out of the ground and show the difference in the dining hall. They're much more beautiful. They have a long shelf life. And we did a taste test that even tasted better. And the price you get when you sell it is 3 times as high. So everybody was excited. And then one day I'll go outside and the place is covered with caterpillars, not hundreds and not thousands, hundreds of thousands of caterpillars all over, and not little tiny caterpillars, huge caterpillars, hawk moth caterpillars, the size of your thumb. And they're all over, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And I was like, no, this is it. I can't spray. I can't do anything. What am I going to do? And I went back because there weren't mobile phones. I went back to a real phone and I said, Mario, please. And he's a very busy man. And all over the country, he's in charge of all the organic farming. I said, please, please come. You've got to help me. Maybe we should just spray. I don't know what to do. You got to help me. And he said, okay, I'll come. As if he's heard this story many times. So after a few hours, he came by and I took him through the field. I said, look here. Look at the number of caterpillars. What's going on? What should I do? Should I just spray and forget it? And this is the future of organic farming here. The kibbutz is, I'll have to leave. They're never going to let me be a farmer. He looks through and he comes back and he says, listen, Michael, don't do anything. I said, what? What do you mean don't do anything? He said, don't do anything. And then he said, I want to tell you a line from the Talmud. In the Talmud, it says, before God makes a plague, he makes a cure. And I was like, what is he quoting the Talmud for? I have hundreds of thousands of caterpillars here and he's quoting the Talmud. He said, listen, let me tell you a story. A farmer just like you called me and said, you got to come over. And there's caterpillars all over. And I went over there and I said, look up in the sky. You see all those storks in the sky? Those storks are planned as a cure for the plague, because when the caterpillars migrate, so do the birds. And what are the birds going to eat? The caterpillars. And as I'm talking to him, this is a story he tells me, the storks come down into the field and they eat all of his caterpillars. So I said, thank you very much for this story. It's very fascinating, but there's no storks in the sky now. You got to tell me what to do. He said, listen, I'll tell you one more time. Before God makes a plague, he makes a cure. Don't do anything. He got in his car and he left. And I cried with real tears because I didn't know what to do. And 2 days later, in the morning, my wife wakes me up and she says, I hear bee eaters, because my wife knows birds very well. And I was like, bee eaters? It must be Mario's. And I ran outside and there's bee eaters all over the field, but they only eat bees, not caterpillars. And then some ravens, some big crows came and they chased away the bee eaters and they're just standing there looking at each other. And I'm like, eat, eat. and they wouldn't eat. And then some cattle egrets, those are the big white birds that sit on top of cattle, they come by, and at first there's 100, and they start eating at every single caterpillar, and then another 100 come, and another 100, and within half an hour, I'm walking through the fields, and the birds are moving, and there's no caterpillars. And it's like, this man is a prophet. He knew what was happening. But I understood afterwards, after I calmed down, that what Mario told me was that I didn't have faith. He said, you have to have faith. When a farmer plants something in the land of Israel, he has to have faith that something's going to happen. When you look at the earth, it's like nothing's going on, but you have to believe that Hashem has made nature in such a way that it will happen. It'll be okay. And if you have faith in Hashem, you have faith in farming, there'll be a connection. And that's something that really changed the way I thought about the world, and how it was a lack of faith. I wasn't connected to God. I didn't believe really in my heart that things would be good. And it changed the way I think about the world, really. And I decided to study a lot more, and to take Judaism a little bit more seriously, and take farming a little bit more seriously. And I just wanted to share the story with fellow farmers who can understand the language of farmers, that the land of Israel is, all built around rain, and their New Year starts right before the rain starts, in Sukkot, and the holiday, it's all about rain. And when you think about it, rain, it gets us wet, it's cold. But when you're a farmer and you look and you see water just coming down from the sky, it's like, this is a blessing. Hashem is talking to us. He's saying, here, this is my gift. And it's just a different way of looking at the world. And I'm so happy that I was a farmer. Now I just do a little bit of farming around my garden, and we farm kids instead. But it's a story I wanted to share, and I hope that all you farmers out there also have a chance to connect to the spiritual side of farming, and hopefully we can make connections with the farmers of the land of Israel, and we can help each other with knowledge and with equipment and whatever possible. So Toda Gedaya for asking me, and I send my blessings of rain and plenty to all of our friends overseas.
Thank you very much. Toda Rabba.
Amen. Thank you.
Michael, what I will do. So here's the story that we're going to start the class with. This is the story of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov said, when I was 20 years old, I'm going to go and change the world. When I was 30 years old, I'm going to go and change my country. When I was 40 years old, I'm going to go and change my community. When I was 50 years old, I was going to go and change my family. And when I'm 60 years old, I'm going to go and change myself. And he did nothing, because it's easier to change your community and the world than it is to change yourself. So when you are young and you have power and strength and mental wisdom, the first step is to change yourself. Because when you make yourself a better person, it is going to impact your husband or your wife. And when your family becomes better, it impacts your children. And when your whole household becomes better, it impacts your neighbors. And your neighbors will have an impact on the community. And the community will have an impact on the country. And if you're lucky, the country will have an impact on the whole world. Maybe someday, journalists and TV crews from New York and Beijing will be landing in the Beit Midrash in Nigeria to come and do a TV show about this unbelievable, beautiful community and what they do and what they grow. And the whole world will watch this. And they'll say, whoa, why don't we do that? Why aren't we like that? So, it's one thing to go out and tell people what to do, but it's another thing to go out and be what to do. So that's really the bottom line of the class. We're going to go into a lot more than that, but that's the bottom line, to sort of start with what that means. So let's go into the idea first of 12 points, and then we're going to go to something. And as I shared with my wonderful, beautiful guest from China, we have something really extraordinary to share with you as well. So first of all, on a very deep mystical level, we've spoken many times in this class about the idea of when you see one thing, there is this side which you don't see. When you see this, there is this side which you do not see. Meaning everything has two sides. That's the letter bet, the number 2, duality. So therefore, when God created the world in 6 days, it has two parts. It has the night, it has the day. So that day and night is 2 times 6 is 12. This is the facets of the 6 days of creation. Remember, the 7th day is not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7th day is in the middle. So the middle has unity. That's the point we want to get to, which hopefully, God willing, in this class we will understand more. But at least in the world of the circle, in the world of action and motion and performance, there is flip-flop, day, night, and that flip-flop, day, night, times 6 is 12. 12 also comes alive, as we know, in the 12 tribes of the Jews of the Bible. Jacob has 12 sons. Each one of these 12 sons becomes a tribe, right? So, I have to just say as a side thing, I was thinking almost of just dropping this whole class and giving another class, because I'm doing this is like a side, but it just dawned on me. I've been reading more and more about Igbo history. And when I realized what happened to the Igbo during the American slavery period, of how many millions, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of your brothers and sisters were taken away to the United States, and what happened to your people in these hundreds of years of slavery, I thought, maybe that's why there's such a strong connection, because we were also slaves. We were slaves in Egypt. You were slaves in America, almost for about the same period of time. We were slaves for 210 years. And you are a people of tribes, and we are a people of tribes. There's a lot to think about in that. And I thought that maybe we should give, maybe not now, but a class about the idea of slavery, and really think about that even slavery, I know this sounds crazy, but even slavery has a holiness, and that is when a person becomes a slave only to God. When one human being is a slave to another human being, that's the Holocaust. That's hell. That's the worst of the worst. But when a person has that same servitude to God, that becomes blessing. That's an amazing thing to do. And that's why if you read the Bible carefully, not in Chinese and not in English, but in the holy language, you will see that God says, let my people go, that they should be my slaves. The word Eved, Avadim, they should be my servants, my slaves. Just since we're on a side point of the main class, I just want to do another little side point, and then we'll come back to the main class. But a side point on the side point is, one of the stories I love the most is the king of Egypt was Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was God. Now, I don't know if you look up in the dictionary, what does it mean to be God? One of the definitions of being God is you never go to the bathroom. So Pharaoh, because he told everybody he was God, he never went to the bathroom, except at about 3:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, while all of Egypt was sleeping. Those of us that are men know what it's like to have to go to the bathroom in the morning, going beep, 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 between leg and leg and leg, right? So all of a sudden, Pharaoh is going down to the bushes by the water, and while the whole city's sleeping, there's this, right? Pharaoh gets to go to the bathroom. Okay, because think about this. Where does God send Moses to go confront Pharaoh? When we used to have demonstrations in universities in the 1960s in America, we would go right into the principal's office. We would go right to where the power was. That's where we would go. So why does God send Moses to go down to the river in the early morning, because here's the scene. Pharaoh is running down to the water, can't wait to get down there to go to the bathroom. And all of a sudden, from behind a bush, surprise, pops up Moses. Hello, hello, God of Egypt, who never goes to the bathroom. I would like to talk to you about letting my people go. And Pharaoh says, I'll make you a deal. Let me go, and I'll let your people go, right? But the bottom line is, it was not just about letting the people go. It was about letting the people go for a purpose to serve God. Just to go, what does that mean? Then you're going to fall into another Egypt, no matter what it looks like. Another country that worships gold and silver. Another country that thinks because of how much money you have, therefore that's how important you are. Nonsense. Do you have more money than God? Any idea how much money God has? So God is not impressed with money. Do you think after 120 years, when a person dies and comes up to God, and the guy had $500 million in his bank account, God goes, whoa, 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 look who's here. Whoa, 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 stop everything. Hey, Gabriel, Michael, angels, look who's here. No, not at all. They don't look at how much money you have. They look at what did you do with your money? Who did you help? Who did you feed? Who did you give clothing to? Who did you build houses for? That's what, you're going to go upstairs with a lot of money and have to explain what you did with that money in the service of God. Otherwise, it's just idolatry. It's a service of self. So therefore, this idea of finding balance comes back to our class now. This idea means that in every facet of the 6 days of creation, there are 12 parts. We can find a way in all of that to connect to God. In the building of the holy nation, there are 12 tribes, and each one of them are in the camp. Oh, wait, I have my. Here we go. Just 1 second. Okay, I hope you'll be able to see this. Okay, so this was the camp of the Jewish people after they left Egypt. In the middle was the portable temple. On the sides here were the camps of the Levites. This little area here was the camp where Moses and Aaron were. And then you have 12 tribes. So you notice that each direction, north, south, east, and west, has 1, 2, 3 camps. And this is because you have not only in, as we've spoken before, not only in space, these 4 directions, but in time, in the year, we have 4 seasons, and each season has 3 months. So the 12 tribes represent not only a rectification of the 4 winds or the 4 directions of the world, but also of the 12 tribes of the 4 seasons of the year. So the 12 really stems from 4. And it stems from 4 because the number 4 represents the 4-letter name of God. And each time that these 4 letters are arranged in different orders creates the energy behind each month. And this is why we wear on our head tefillin. The tefillin that we put on our head has in it 4 compartments, each one representing one of the 4 letters of God's name. The other component we put on our is on our arm. But the tefillin, which is on our arm, has only 1 component, because the body, the physical, has to be unified. Now, we're going to go really deep into this idea, but I want to show you something. This was the little surprise here. Those of you that are familiar with the phenomenal healing of the Asians called acupuncture. So in acupuncture, there are meridians. There are different lines that run through the body. And on these lines are points. And each one of these points are very important to understand when you're doing acupuncture or acupressure, how to release energy in order to create healing. So I found something which I'd like to share with you. If you see here, this is a picture of the tefillin that goes on the head, and it corresponds directly to these 3 DU 24, 23, and 16 acupressure points of the head. Those of you that study acupuncture will understand how important these 3 points are. In fact, if you then go to here, oops, sorry. Hope this isn't too small. This is how the tefillin comes on the arm. Again, directly relating to these 3 acupressure or acupuncture points. And then when the tefillin comes on the hand, let's make it a little bigger. Again, these correlate to these particular points. Now, I'm going to spend some time now speaking a little bit about tefillin, but I want to tell you an amazing thing. And I didn't have a chance to go deep into this yet, but it's an amazing idea. When we first talk about the unit, the tefillin that sits on the head, as I mentioned, inside of here are 4 components. The word for this particular part of the tefillin in the Bible is a word called totofot. And when they asked Rabbi Akiva, what does this word totofot come from? He said it's 2 words in 2 languages that mean 2. And one of those 2 languages he simply referred to as African, a language of Africa. And that in this language in Africa, there is a pronunciation. Now, unfortunately, Africa is a really big place, so I don't know where in Africa he was referring to. But the point is much deeper than that. The point is that there is some kind of oil of holy light that is buried in Africa. And somehow, maybe our classes, who knows, but somehow, if we are able to take this wisdom and crack the earth of Africa and allow the oil and that light to shine, maybe like Hanukkah, that is part of the 2. The 2 and the 2, which are the 4 letters of God, which is all about creating this unity. Now, inside of these 4 boxes, there are a parchment which has in it a different section of the Bible inside each of them. In one of them, it's secretly from a book called the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Creation. It talks about 32 paths, 32 shvilim, pathways to wisdom. This idea, 32, is the numerical value of the Hebrew word for lev, which is heart. Heart is 32. So there are 32 rivers of streams that come from the mind, and they enter and open the heart. On the same hand, we have a Mishnah, a teaching in our Torah that talks about 48 ways to acquire wisdom. And 48 is the numerical value of the Hebrew word for moach, which is brain. So the brain can open up 48 levels of wisdom, And by opening up 48 levels of wisdom, 32 rivers come down and open up the heart. Now the question is really, why 48? Because we know from our other classes, we've spoken about the idea of 50 gates of wisdom. So why stop at 48? Why not 50? The answer is that there are two gates which are in your hands. It's your job. One is called the gate of the awe of God, which we talked about last time. And the other is the highest gate called the love of God. That's up to you. You have to do that. But once you do that, you can open up the other 48 and release the 32 rivers. This is why, since 48 means the brain, 480 means the brain of the world. When we came out of slavery, when we left Egypt, and we have a holiday to commemorate that called Passover, from the time we left Egypt to the time that King Solomon built, oh well, whatever, here we go. So the time that King Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem, which this is the part I love the most. You just go out here, you go down to Rehov Palmach, you walk straight until you come to the old city, and there it is. Okay, so on the time from leaving Egypt to the time of the door opening up for the first time for the people to go into the Temple of Solomon was 480 years. It was a level of elevation of human consciousness from being a slave to being an absolute free to serve God person. Because one of the dangers of being a slave has two very dangerous elements. One, the human tendency is to want to make another person a slave as a retribution, as revenge, out of anger. How could you do this to my people? Now I'm going to do it to your people. But as soon as you do that, you're as bad as they are. This is why it's an unbelievable thing. Think about what the Egyptians did to Jews. I mean, even in the horrors, and they were horrors of American slavery, you never had a situation where they were taking the slaves in America, taking their babies and breaking off their heads and using their bodies for building buildings. But this is what was happening to the Jewish babies. They were just killing the babies and using them to make rocks and building mortar out of them. So when the Jews came out of there, you would think that the Jews for the rest of their lives would hate the Egyptians. And God says an amazing thing. God says, do not hate the Egyptians. What? Why not? Because despite what happened to you, you were still a guest in their house. Now, they were not very nice. Doesn't matter. We're not worried about the Egyptians. We're worried about the impact on ourselves. We don't want to become cruel Egyptians because we suffered under the hands of the Egyptians. We want to be better people. We want to be able to be human, elevated people. So therefore, that experience of coming out of Egypt is something that allows us to rise up to the highest level of opening up this light in wisdom. That's why there was the 50 gates of wisdom from coming out of Egypt to the receiving of the Torah. But it has to be brought down into this world. Now watch this. When it comes now to the arm, when it comes to the arm, you should notice here that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now what's happening is this holiness of the mind has now gone and opened up the heart. This part of the tefillin has to be placed opposite the heart So it receives its energy from the heart. And now this energy begins to go down through the 7 days of creation until it comes to one's hand. This is the idea of bringing holiness from the highest level, understanding, opening the heart, allowing this to come down into one's own hands. Now, what happens when it comes to the hands? Here, this might be a little hard to understand, but try to stay with me. We actually have 3 Hebrew letters on the hand. The first one is this, The first one are these 3 letters. I hope you'll recognize them. They are the letter Shin. You have the 3 sides of the Shin. Okay, now on the head of the tefillin, on both sides, also has the letter Shin. Shin, in brief, means light. So the light that shines from our wisdom comes in the form of kindness that we do with our hands. The next one is a little harder to see. It's these 3. And these 3 here create the Hebrew letter Daled. And the last one is this one here by itself, which is the letter Yud. These 3 letters, Shin, Daled, and Yud, is God's name, or one of God's names. This particular name of God is the name that is drawn from a sentence. The sentence is, Mi Sha'amar Dai, the one who says enough. This is where it stops. It's the name that's associated with Mashiach. It's the name that's associated with Tikkun Olam. It's the name that's associated with the rectification and peace of the entire world. So we actually get to wear that name on our hands. Our hands now become vessels for God. So how do we become a vessel for God? So I have a really dear friend of mine, Michael Kagan, and he told me this story, true story. Michael Kagan is a very spiritual man. He's very into all kinds of things like mystical meditations and things of this nature and so on. And somebody said to him, would you like to meet a really holy man? And he said yes. And he went into a very, very religious area in Jerusalem. And there were a lot of people waiting there. It was about 8 o'clock at night. And when he came in, he sat down. He said to somebody, how long have you been waiting here? And the man said, I've been waiting 4 hours. And he says, wow, how much longer do you think it will be? He says, I don't know, maybe another 4 hours. But for some reason, my friend got called in to meet this holy man. He said he never saw a man thin in his life like this man. And this man said to my friend, he says, what are you doing? So he explained, I'm a scientist, blah, 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 blah. He says, no, what are you doing with your soul? He said, well, I'm very much in meditating, helping people to rise their souls up to heaven. And the holy man said, that's nonsense. I was like, what? Nonsense? Yeah. In Hebrew, we call it shtuyot. It's nonsense. He said, what? It's nonsense. Meditation. Why, there were great Kabbalists who all taught nonsense. He said, let me tell you how to meditate. He said, and we just read this in our synagogues last Shabbos. He says, where was Abraham? And he says, Abraham was sitting at the entrance to his tent. And the man says, and what was happening? He said, well, God came to visit him. He had just circumcised himself, which, believe me, at 8 days, it's one thing, but to do it at 99 years old, it's a different story. So he was like sore, and God came to visit him like we visit the sick. And the man said, think about this. What was Abraham doing? He was sitting. Just sit down at the entrance to your temple, at the entrance to your tent, at the entrance to your house. Sit down. If you get in touch with yourself, God will come to you. That's meditating. That is what was happening. Abraham sat down and God came to visit him. Why? Because by sitting down and contemplating life, he was saying, here, God, take this vessel, take these hands, and allow me to be a conduit, allow me to be a channel that allows you, God, to have your name, Shin Daled Yud, on my hands. So when I go into this world, I'm going into this world to bring this holy light down and into this world. How does this work? So when Jacob was traveling, he went to sleep at night, and there were 12 stones that he put around his head. And when he woke up in the morning, the 12 stones had become one stone. It's right there. You don't even need Rashi. Just read the Bible in Hebrew, and you will see that the 12 stones became one stone. A miracle. One of the Bible miracles. How did it happen? So let's take a deep look at the word in Hebrew for stone. Because a stone, a rock, seems to be the most least spiritual thing in the world. And if you're a farmer, it's probably the thing you hate the most. When you're trying to clear the land to plant, you don't want to have rocks and stones. You want to get rid of them. So they're like worthless. They don't give food. They don't do anything. What's a stone? Well, let's take a look. One of the words for stone in Hebrew is called Evan. Which that was Michael's name, Evan Esh, which means the firestone. So Evan is stone. How do you spell Evan? Aleph, Bet, Nun. Ooh, okay, let's check this out. Aleph, Bet means father, Av, God. Aleph, Bet alludes to the alphabet. The Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, the letters, the 22 letters that God uses to create the world. So suddenly, in this most non-spiritual thing called a rock, in there somehow is a connection to Father, to God, is a connection to all the letters of creation. And if you know how to deal with it, you can open it to the last letter, which is Nun, which is, again, the 50th gate of wisdom to the infinite. So somehow, if you can find God in a rock, then all of the physical world becomes something that you can push aside and find God in everything. Who had a struggle with a rock? Moses. God says to Moses, talk to the rock and bring water. Right? Good luck. When we're done with this class, go outside, take a rock and smash it and see if there's any water in there. I don't think you're going to find any water in any rock. But God says, no, don't believe in nature. Believe in God. In fact, there's an amazing story in the Talmud of Ben-Dosa. Ben-Dosa was, he can't even use words to explain who Ben-Dosa was. And one Friday, his daughter comes running in. She says, Daddy, we don't have any oil for lighting Shabbos, Shabbat candles. All we have is vinegar. And everybody knows vinegar doesn't burn. And he said, go ahead, just light the vinegar. She says, Daddy, what are you talking about? How are we going to light Shabbat candles with vinegar? Vinegar doesn't burn. He said, go ahead, light the candles with vinegar. So they lit the candles with vinegar, and it burned until the end of Shabbat. And they came and they said to him, wow, did you do a miracle? Did you make a miracle by making vinegar burn? Was this a miracle? He said, no, it was not a miracle. The problem wasn't the vinegar. The problem was your brain. Your brain, you thought only oil burns. That's the problem. The reason oil burns is because God makes oil burn, not because oil burns. So therefore, if you're able to open up your connection deeper to God, the same God that makes oil burn will make vinegar burn. It's not a miracle. It's reality. The problem is that we don't see that reality. And therefore, through the wisdom, what the tefillin represents, that wisdom, we are able to change what other people will think you're doing miracles. You're not doing miracles at all. You're just working as a vessel to allow God's light to come into this world. So now what happens is these 12 stones, because Jacob realized that there are stones, but it's all God, they were able to do the impossible and become one stone. When Moses was supposed to talk to the stones, that's because speaking is our spiritual power. When he hit the stone, it was a mistake, because there's two ways to bring God's light into the world. One is talking. Talk to your enemy. Talk to people you don't like. Talk to people who are different than you. Talk to them. You know what you'll find out? Hey, they're not so bad. They're really not so bad. It doesn't matter if they live in Africa. It doesn't matter if they live in China. We're all made by the same God. We all have goodness in us. If you talk to the goodness will come out. That's what's amazing. So if you know how to find God inside the stones, even stones can unify. Even the 12 tribes can unify all of time and all of the four winds of direction. How does it happen? So Jacob has two names. One name is Israel and one name is Jacob. The word Israel in Hebrew, the letters Israel, or I'll pronounce it in Hebrew, Israel, means Yashar El, straight to God. Yaakov means to be bent. And it also means the bottom of your foot, the heel. So Yaakov is struggling in a physical world of how to bring unity, and Israel is complete straightness to God. So the tefillin that are on the head, this is called the house of Israel. And Israel's wife is called Leah. As it says in the Bible, and Yaakov woke up in the morning and he saw it was Leah. He saw that through Leah would come the ultimate light of the morning, the ultimate redemption. However, on this tefillin, there's a knot. The leather creates a knot, and the knot sits in the back of the head. On the house that's on the arm, there's also a knot, but the knot has to touch the house. This is called the house of Jacob. Jacob's wife was Rachel. Israel marries Leah. Rachel is married to Yaakov. That's why Yaakov had instant love for Rachel, because it was physical. It was the purification of the body. And Israel had to come to discover Leah because there was a process of the mind. Watch this. If a person is doing a holy act in the physical world, it's holy. That's it. It's holy. But when a person's in his mind, it might not be so simple. Therefore, for the knot to connect to the house requires your brain. Think of it like electricity. If the circuit is closed, the electricity moves. If you break the circuit, the electricity is off. If your mind is thinking and focusing on God, you are connecting these two. If, God forbid, the mind is thinking about something else, you are breaking this connection. So this is the power that Yaakov has, the power that Israel has to be able to connect heaven to this world through the usages of the mind. Okay, I just want to bring out one more point. I know it's getting a little bit late, but the problem is I always get so excited about this class. I realize preparing like 3 days worth of material for just a little over an hour. So I apologize, but I just want to bring in one more idea. Now, this is the idea of how do we purify from the mind into very practical usages of our soul. So I think I might have mentioned this once. I'm going to repeat it again. We say that in the Shema Yisrael, the holiest of the holy of all prayers, listen, Israel, God is our God, God is one. Now, in that prayer, there are 6 words. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. This is the rectification of the 6 days that we spoke about. Days. And then there's another verse we say, which we whisper. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Li'olam Vo'ed. Blessed is God's kingdom forever and ever. But we whisper it. Why? Because those are also 6 words. Those 6 words are night. And we whisper it because those nights have not been turned into day, 24-hour day. So now there's the revealed Shema Yisrael, and then there's the whispering. These are the 12 words of the 12 points that bring us to balance. Now, the word at the end, Echad, is one. Echad, which means one, has 3 letters. Aleph, Chet, Daled. Aleph means there is one God. Chet is the number 8. We take the concept of one God, we bring the idea down through the 7 levels of heaven, plus earth, that's 8, and then Daled, which is 4, we shoot this energy into the 4 directions of the world. So in saying Echad, we are unifying godliness into this world. It's an amazing thing. Think about what you are. Think about what you're doing. We're not talking about playing basketball here. We're talking about the capability of the ultimate unity of bringing godly energy into one in this world. Now, the numerical value of the word one is 13, because Aleph is 1, plus 8 is 9, plus 4 is 13. And actually, as Jews, 13 is a very lucky number. So 13 is Echad. Right after we say Echad, the next word we say is V'ahavta, and you will love. Echad is something we do in our mind. It's an intellectual thing. And love is something we do in our heart. And the word love in Hebrew, which is Ahava, is Aleph, Aleph, Hey, Bet, Hey, which is the numerical value of 13. Echad is 13, 1 is 13, and love is 13. And when we pull together love of the heart, the 32 rivers, and the 48 ways of acquiring wisdom of the mind, we bring 13 and 13 together. This is 26, which is the name of God. Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. That's the number 26. So the human being has this ability to become godly. But where's the problem happen? So it happens because if you read in the Bible, in that same paragraph, God warns you, do not go after your hearts and your eyes. Don't believe what you see. Well, I'll give you an example. I was actually thinking about this today. Can you see this? It's just my son. It's nothing special. No magic. No, nothing's going to jump out. So look, see, just my glasses. But what is it? Woo! What is it, right? It is, what color is it? Red, orange, right? You wouldn't say it's blue. You wouldn't say it's green. Especially my Igbo brothers and sisters, you guys have great eyesight for beautiful colors. So what color? Guess what? Let's call it red, right? Everyone, just show me by your hand. Do you all agree it's red? Is this red? Yeah, okay. Yeah, right. It's
Red.
not red. It's
Right,
not red.
right,
Why is it not red?
right.
Because in science, when light hits something, it absorbs the colors. And if this something does not have that color in it, it rejects it and sends it back. So that in science, this is actually every color but red. Red is the one color it's not. And that's why you see red, because the red can't get absorbed. It has to bounce off and come back to you. Now think about that. If you ask somebody, I'll bet you $1 million this is red. Oh, they'll bet like that because you see it with your own eyes. But when you use your brain and you understand science, you understand, guess what? This is blue, this is green, this is everything, but it's not red. It's not red. Even though I see red, it's not red. So the Torah warns us, don't just believe what you see with your eyes. Use your wisdom to see. And then you will begin to see things for what they really are. But the question is, it should say, don't go after your eyes and your heart. Why does it say heart before eyes? First, your eyes see something, and then you desire it. The answer is, your eyes only see what your heart, what your wisdom has trained you to see. That's a beautiful thing. That means you can re-educate yourself. Whatever you learned yesterday becomes smarter today. And now when you have more wisdom, then when you see with your eyes, okay, yeah, when you're in the store, you're going to say, I'd like to buy that red thing, but you know it's not red because you're wiser now. So that's the power of going into the tent and finding who you are. The very last thought, I promise. I know I told you this. Remember last time? The difference between the Finns and the Jews. Remember I told you this? The Finns don't say goodbye, they just leave. And the Jews say goodbye, but they never leave. And it's hard to say goodbye to you guys. So that's why I'm stalling. But I will share with you one more idea. The Torah says, or sorry, the Talmud says that a person does not bang their toe unless it was decreed in heaven. Everything that happens, happens because heaven decides it to happen. But we are the ones who control our own destiny. We do not believe in fate. We believe in God. As God says to Abraham, go out and look at the stars. And he was a master of the stars. And he looked at the stars and he said, wow, look, in the stars, I'm never going to have a child. And God said, watch this. And God moved the stars around. So God says, don't believe in the stars. Believe in me. I created the stars. I can move anything, everything. All I want you to do is connect and be with me. So when it says this idea of everything, even banging one's toe, we are taught that when something happens to a person, they should be mishfashfesh b'ma'asav. They should sit down and think about their actions and try to wonder what they might have done wrong that needs to be fixed, that has caused this to happen to me. What if you can't? What if you sit down and you think and you think and you think and you don't know why? So the Talmud says if you don't know why, I'll tell you why. It's because you're not studying enough Torah, God's wisdom. Now, there was a great rabbi who died about 20 plus years ago, known as the Chabad rabbi, the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Brooklyn. And he said, wait a minute, if you don't know why choose that commandment, the commandment of studying Torah? Maybe you didn't put on Tefillin. Maybe you didn't put a mezuzah on your door. Maybe you ate something you should not have eaten. Well, why say because you didn't study Torah? And he answers something very deep. Because God's wisdom is light. And when you're searching in a dark room, you need light. And if you go inside of yourself and it's dark in there, that's why you couldn't find your answer. You don't have enough light. So increase the amount of light inside of you, and you will find the answers to everything that's happening in your life. But you have to make that effort in order to be able to raise out that of who we are. And that's really what it's all about. In every aspect of the 12 points that go to the 12 months, or the 12 aspects of the 6 days of creation of day and night and day and night, every minute of our lives, we can be taking this holiness and bringing it down into our hands and into our actions. It all begins with each one of us. So I just want to thank you all very much. God willing, your community will get to the point where the New York Times and the newspapers from Beijing and all around the London Times, they'll all be coming to see who are these wonderful people. And I'll be on the same plane with all of our friends coming in from China. And then we'll kidnap everybody and bring everybody to Israel.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yes, God willing.
Next year in
Okay.
Jerusalem.
Yes. Bye, Ethan. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.
Bye.